So, in constitutional theory, there are generally two ways to interpret the Constitution. One is the originalist way, or the strict constructionist way, and the idea of the living document, or the loose constructionist way. Basically, the originalist way of interpreting the Constitution is by reading the Constitution in the way it would have been read when it was written. So that would require knowing what the words it was written with meant at that time versus what the words may or may not mean now. The concept of the living document or living constitution is that the meaning of the written words in the Constitution are subject to interpretation based on the modern usage and meaning of the specific words, rather than what those words meant at the time of writing. For example, in modern usage, the word speech distinctly refers to either a verbal address to an audience, like giving a speech, or more relevant to the point, specifically verbal expression. I'm bringing up speech in reference to freedom of speech. Obviously, we're talking about the Constitution here, and this is one of the biggest things. So, if you take historical context of the word speech, which includes how it was used or what it meant at the time of the writing of the Constitution, and what it was understood to mean in British law, where the founders derived the idea from, the word speech included non-verbal forms of the expression of thoughts, ideals, etc. If evolving standards of language and contemporary interpretation are to be applied to the Constitution, freedom of speech would not protect any form of written speech, since the modern definition of speech is purely verbal, nor would it protect the clothes you wear, nor art. Yet all of these things are protected today under the First Amendment, contrary to the living document theory. This is an example of strict interpretation or originalism. If we use the originalist interpretation of freedom of speech already, then it would only be logical to use it consistently and across the board. So let's put the living document theory to the test with a hypothetical example. So in this hypothetical example, there is an 11th Amendment added to the Bill of Rights. And that amendment will be, Congress shall make no law abridging the right of the people to slaughter their respective kids. So, in today's cultural context, this would allow parents to kill their children for food. But using historical context, we find that the term kid during 1787 formally referred to goats, or young goats. The official recognition of the use of kid to informally refer to a human child was established in the 1840s, which was 50 years or more after the written Constitution. So, depending on what lens you look through, this amendment could mean startlingly different things. Someone who sees through the lens of a living constitution has no constitutional justification for not allowing parents to kill their children, while an originalist, using historical context, could determine the usage of the word kid when it was written to clarify the meaning of the amendment, while also showing that parents do not have the right to kill their children under this amendment. A living constitutionalist cannot justify the amendment as an originalist could, because you must either be an originalist or a loose interpretationist or a living constitutionist. You can't be both. Regardless if you're a loose constructionist or a strict constructionist, neither can switch back and forth between different ways of interpretation. You have to remain consistent. To pick and choose between being a living constitutionalist or an originalist would not only be hypocritical, but illogical and arbitrary, which are adjectives that should not be representative of the law. You see flip-flopping like this all the time in the political sphere, especially from people on the left, where they'll use the Constitution when it benefits them and they'll bash the Constitution when it doesn't benefit them. I think Hillary Clinton did this. A lot of people on the left use the 14th Amendment to justify abortion as a right, but then they will attack the Second Amendment and a lot of the time want the removal of the Second Amendment. So they like to pick and choose the different amendments in the Constitution that benefit their agenda or do not benefit their agenda. That actually reminds me of something. I could actually go into a few more problems with the living document theory. Since I brought up the 14th Amendment, I can start there. Like I said, people on the left generally use the 14th Amendment to claim that abortion is a right because there is a hidden privacy clause within the 14th Amendment, which doesn't appear at all. You can look this up. I believe it's the justification that the judges used for Roe v. Wade, is that there's a privacy clause given by the 14th Amendment. And I'll actually just read that to you really quick so you can see how there's no privacy clause in here. The part of the 14th Amendment that they claim gives the privacy clause is this: no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. The abridging the privileges or immunities of is where they say, oh, that no abridging the privileges or immunities of citizens, that is the privacy clause that gives a sphere of privacy to a citizen, even though this does not mention the word privacy anywhere. It says nothing about a privacy clause. There's nothing relating to privacy in here. It simply talks about not abridging the privileges or immunities of citizens. There is no mention of privacy in here at all, and they use this to say abortion is a right, which it just doesn't make any sense. Not only does it not make sense in that particular part, but also the following line of that. It says, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Life. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life. That is abortion. So, like, right after the clause they're using as to say it's a privacy clause that includes abortion, the line right after that says no person shall be deprived of life right there. That is an aspect of the living Constitution. That is the aspect of the living document, is finding hidden interpretations within the words that actually aren't there, like finding new meanings that aren't there in the words. There's nowhere that talks about a privacy. There's no privacy clause. It's invented by interpretation. It's the imposition of your ideas. It's just stupid. Another issue is that in the First Amendment, people constantly say separation of church and state, separation of church and state. The separation of church and state, those words don't even appear in the Constitution at all. The First Amendment simply talks about the establishment of a religion. It says nothing about separation of church and state. I think one of the only times that phrase actually shows up is in a letter sent by Thomas Jefferson. I forget exactly. But this is what loose constructionists do. They take a phrase, and then they have an idea or a vision, and using the vast power of interpretation, they squish and stretch and bend the words to impose their ideas into the text that isn't actually in the text. Speaking again of the First Amendment, it's extremely popular today of the left to promote hate speech laws, banning certain speech. There are tons of left-wing colleges that ban conservative speakers from speaking. Left-wing college groups and left-wing youth groups won't even invite conservative or even libertarian speakers to the colleges to come speak. The left are very intolerant when it comes to ideas. But anyway, in a way, hate speech laws are emblematic of the idea of the living Constitution, because hate speech, it has the word speech in it, so it's clearly speech, and freedom of speech is protected under the First Amendment. So I really do not see the confusion. One of the major intentions of the founders for the freedom of speech is particularly for political speech. And political speech is extremely divisive, and lo and behold, you'll find a lot of political speech out there that the left condemns as hate speech. So there you go. Freedom of speech also includes the protection of hate speech. And then there are those people, there's always those people who bring up the you can't yell fire in a movie theater, which has constantly been debunked over and over and over. And if you aren't familiar with that, people say, oh, we have some regulations on freedom of speech because you can't yell fire in a movie theater. That's illegal. Yes, that is illegal because that is not speech. What do you mean that's not speech? You're speaking, that's speech, isn't it? Well, if you're using the modern definition of speech, then technically, yes, you are yelling, you're talking fire. Technically, that is speech. But again, using the historical context of what freedom of speech means, it includes verbal and non-verbal expression. Yelling fire in a movie theater is not expression. It is a call to action. Expressing an opinion or having a conversation is different than a call to action. Saying you hate black people or you hate white people is protected as speech because that is an opinion. You are expressing your beliefs. If you yelled out, hey, go beat up those black people, or hey, go beat up those white people, that is a call to action. That is a call to violence. That is not an expression. It is not speech. That is why it is not allowed. It's a call to violence. It's not the same thing as an expression of speech. If you try to use that can't yell fire in a movie theater argument against any constitutional lawyer worth their salt, you'd get laughed out of the room. So, in conclusion, I do not like the living document theory, obviously. I don't think it holds up very well. I don't think that it is effective or the proper way to interpret it. When you include an infinite number of possible interpretations, that includes an infinite number of possible catastrophes that could come with that. I think the most logical thing is to read the Constitution as it was written, read it as it was meant to be written by the people who wrote it, because otherwise you will have people imposing their vision into the text where it actually isn't in the text. I mean, in many ways, we're really living in a post-constitutional republic. I mean, the federal government has vastly more power than it was originally meant to have. I think if we just really started to be governed by the Constitution again, if we eliminate unconstitutional federal agencies, eliminate unconstitutional taxes, departments, I think that will lead us to a more equal society. I think that will lead us to a more stable society, a more fair society, where there are no special groups that have group rights and that there are special mascots favored by the anointed. Sorry, I just got finished reading The Vision of the Anointed, so it kind of slipped out. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please leave a comment down below if you did watch, and give me some constructive criticism, anything you think I got wrong in this video, your opinions on it. I'd like that a lot. I really miss Scalia. I hope Gorsuch does a good job, and I'll see you in the next video.